the Legal Corner podcast series. Welcome to today's episode of The Legal Corner, a podcast which covers a variety of legal issues to keep you informed. Hosted by attorney at law Colin Denoon and communications specialist Leonardo Torres. A pleasant good day to all of our listeners. It's such a pleasure to be with you all again for another episode of the Legal Corner podcast series. Unfortunately, this will be our final episode as we bring the curtain down on season 4. It has been a very long run, and those who would have been with us throughout the journey would have observed generally the format of our program is that we interview guests of various specialties, whether it be divorce, family matters, children custody, you name it. And we, throughout these seasons that would have passed, we tried to select a lot of topics that that persons who would be listeners to our program can benefit from, whether it be through their day-to-day living or their friends or family. But our final episode today is a bit different, whereby we wouldn't be interviewing a guest, so to speak. We'll be turning the microphone on ourselves, rather. So as you know, I am Leonardo Torres, one of the co-hosts here at the Legal Corner podcast series. And joining me today is Colin Denoon, as you all would be very familiar with, who's our main host throughout this Legal Corner podcast series. And what's different about the final episode today, apart from us speaking to each other, is that Colin has some exciting news, whereby he recently released his self-authored book entitled The Entrepreneurial Lawyer of the Future, a guide for lawyers venturing out on their own. Now, I've had the privilege of perusing this book that a good friend of mine, Colin, would have self-authored. And for those who would not have read this book as yet, the book basically is a guide to future lawyers. It really speaks about the entrepreneurial lawyer of the future as a manual for attorneys in private practice. The book brings together key concepts about business of law and practice of law. The book also walks the reader through the process of establishing their own law practice, beginning with the decision to start on their own. It gives guidance on how to get your first client and how to create demand for your services by engaging in business development activities. I'm so proud of Colin. Colin, good evening. How are you doing today?
Good day, Leonardo, and good day to all of our viewers. I'm so happy to be with you once more, and I'm doing great.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. So, as I mentioned before, we're having a conversation today. And as I mentioned before as well, I'm so proud of you for penning a book. You are the self-author of this novel. And it's something very few of us would know, a friend or someone personally we know who wrote a book. But just want to know, just for me, what's the inspiration to write this book?
Well, Leonardo, thank you so much for your kind words. And as you said, this is, in fact, our last season of our series. And allow me to put on my main host hat just for a few seconds to thank yourself and also all the members of our team and the audience for their support thus far. In terms of the inspiration for this book, it came from personal experience. As you know, and as many persons may be aware, I would have ventured out into private practice as a very young attorney and in a very early stage in my career. And even though I'm still a junior attorney, I realized that there wasn't any book for private practice attorneys based in the Caribbean. So that was really my inspiration. That was really the circumstance that inspired me to put pen to paper, if you like, and really document my thoughts and ideas and experiences as it relates to both the business of law and the practice of law.
All right, well said. Now, when you in the process of writing, in your mind, who was your audience? Who do you think you were directing this book to?
Well, I was directing it to attorneys who are venturing out on their own. So, as in the book I discussed, there are situations which give rise to attorneys who go out on their own. Basically, there are those who have to go out on their own. There are those who choose to go out on their own, and then there are those who feel as though they have to go out on their own. So, the person who has to go out on their own may be someone who just finished law school and is having difficulty obtaining employment. The person who chooses to go on their own may be someone who is more established as an attorney, but they may have been working for the government or at a firm or a company, etc. And then there are people who feel as though they have to go out on their own. These are the people who are having challenges in their workplace. They are frustrated and so on, and they just feel as though they don't have any other option but to go out on their own. So those were the persons that I had in mind, the categories of persons that I had in mind when I was writing this book.
All right. Now, uh, before you conceptualized the idea of writing this book, did you do any research? Did you find that there was a need for a book like this? Or, so to speak, why do you think a book like this is necessary, is what I'm asking.
When I was preparing to start out on my own, and even the early days, I would have looked for materials to guide me in my journey. So some of those books I would have referenced as sources and relied upon as sources in my own publication. And one of the books that stands out is a book by Mr. Thunberg that talks about how to start and build a law practice. So that really and truly, perhaps for the past almost 50 years, has been the go-to book for attorneys who are venturing out on their own. But as those of us in the Caribbean know, there are, if I want to say, situations that are peculiar to us in the region. So, for example, we have a small market size. So that in itself is a difference as opposed to something that's written in the United States. Also, we cannot advertise. So those two distinguishing factors would make a book written by someone practicing in the region a valuable tool. Now, the book isn't only for Caribbean attorneys because there are generally applicable principles to attorneys around the world. So it isn't only limited to Caribbean attorneys, but what it does is that it gives credence, or it gives representation, or it acknowledges the experiences of attorneys who are in small jurisdictions in a way that the other literature on the market has failed to do. So that would make it necessary, and also it focuses on both the practice of law and the business of law. Oftentimes, as attorneys, we are very competent in our practice areas, but the business aspect of it is often neglected or lacking, especially for persons who did not receive formal business training. So, for example, persons who did not have completed an MBA or did not do, for example, a bachelor's in management or anything like that. You're talking about someone whose knowledge of business will be limited to one course at law school. So when you come out into the marketplace, you realize that much more is required of you. Of course, this book is not exhaustive, right? But as is written in the title, it is a guide. So it provides a framework through which attorneys can approach these subjects, and you are free and welcome to seek additional sources of information, do further studies or further research in the areas in which you believe that you would require it.
Understood. Now, I don't know if you know, but before I really got into this book, I am a person whereby, and for those listening, the book is readily available on Amazon. So I'm an avid Amazon shopper. And I've noticed that, as I said, the book is on Amazon. And I usually, when I purchase products, I look at reviews. And the reason why I ask that question about, why you think the book is really necessary is that two of the reviews that I would have observed on Amazon basically spoke to the need of the book. And I just want to make mention of two of them. It would have mentioned that it is a conversation, the book that is, that remains largely absent throughout legal training. And the person went on to offer their congratulations to you. And then I saw another review. Both of these two reviews would have been 5-star reviews. This other reader would have said that the book is full of practical tips that will help you build a thriving practice, right? So I would applaud you that when you conceptualize the book and you identify the need for the book, the fact that persons who would have read the book do agree that there is a need for this book based on just those two reviews that I would have read. Now, I just want to segue a bit to the structure of the book. Tell me a little bit about the structure, why you chose the structure that you're going to talk about. What is the structure, first of all? And if there were any battles in your mind about formation of chapters, which should go first, after, and so forth.
Well, in terms of the creative process, I am someone who likes to plan, for those who know me well. So I would have had a working document in terms of the structure of the book that I initially had in mind. And I had liked the idea of dividing it into two parts. And then under those parts, now you can have the chapters that are organized. So the each part would be like a set, and then the chapters would be a subset of that wider set. And I kept that structure, and I was faithful to that structure, and it resulted in part one being mastering the basics, and part two deals with fostering a growth mindset. This book is a quick read. Each part is divided into three chapters. And I know that attorneys are always pressed for time, right? So I had to get to the point and make the point quickly. And I believe I was able to do that. So in terms of the content, we address subjects such as legal entrepreneurship, sales and marketing, business development, and your keys for profitable relationships. You talk about building your legal knowledge and so much more. I don't want to give out everything because I know persons out there are going to purchase their own copies, but that is really a broad overview of what the structure of the book looks like.
Understood. Now, right before I would have asked that question, I did allude to some of the online reviews of your book as per Amazon. But what about in person? What about in person reviews? What about some of your peers or just strangers who would have read the book and probably reached out to you on LinkedIn or social media or probably call your private practice number? What was some of the feedback like and reaction from the public towards your book?
Well, the feedback has been very positive. I must express my sincere thanks to my friends and colleagues who have purchased the book, and even some of my seniors have graciously purchased the book, and I'm very thankful and appreciative to them for that. Persons have expressed that they have gotten value from what I have written. They have expressed that they have seen the need for it, and they have expressed that a hope that more persons would, as I said, avail themselves to the information that is contained in the book. So overall, the feedback has been very, very positive, and I am very happy about that.
Excellent. There is always a good pat on the shoulder to know that you put your heart and soul into something and you get congratulatory words or just words of encouragement to say yes, job well done. And I would also join the chorus and the choir by saying yes, the book was well read and a job well done. All right. Now, apart from Amazon, where can persons obtain a copy of this book?
The book is available for purchase at the Book Specialist located on Richmond Street in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, West Indies. Also on Instagram, there's a page by the name of Board and Bookless TT. So they stock the book. You can place your order and it is delivered to your door. All right. So those will be the three avenues through which persons can purchase the book.
Perfect. So we have online retailers, we have in-store retailers. That is good news. So we kind of marketing and making it accessible to all and sundry, so to speak. Now, I would have known that this book would have been published around the beginning of March 2024. Do you mind if I ask how long it took to write this book?
Well, Leonardo, if I tell you the truth, this book really, I would say it took me about 3 years from concept to publication. All right.
Right.
So it was a bit of a lengthy process to bring it to the market because after I prepared the first draft, there was tightening that needed to be done, and the editorial process would have taken some time, and then, as you know, there would be formatting and designing and so on. So it took a fairly long period of time, but I didn't rush it, right? Because if we were to go back 3 years, you're talking about in the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic, really and truly was when I would have done a lot of the writing for this book and the research that preceded the writing. So it wasn't something that I was in a hurry to put forward. I wanted to make sure that the message was clear. I wanted to make sure that I communicated the thoughts and ideas that I desired to communicate. And I also wanted to ensure that it was a product that all of us could be proud of as Trinidad and Tobago citizens, even if it is something that is also available on the international market.
Understood. Another question that crossed my mind. So as young people like ourselves, when we do venture out into the unknown, whether it be something that we never prepared for, we didn't think we would have found ourselves there. The Colin that I know, I don't think I know him to be a writer, so to speak, or a publisher of books. I don't know that Colin, right? No, so I would assume that probably you could correct me if I'm wrong, that this was a uncharted territory, so to speak, of doing something like this well into fruition. What was the learning process like? What is that process of probably the legality of what publishing a book is, the copyright, how you put it out there in the market? I don't think you just write up stuff and just go to a bookstore and ask them to sell this. What are some of that? What are some of the behind the scenes like, so to speak? So maybe if we have a listener out there who may not be into law, but might be just into literature, poems, simple stuff like that. So we could probably give them a push in the right direction.
Sure. What I found was helpful was having a plan from the beginning. So from the beginning, I had an idea what the book was going to look like. So it wasn't as though I was just writing, I do one chapter and then I'm wondering what is going to come next. So I always try to keep the broad picture in mind. So that was helpful to me being able to complete the book. Because as you would appreciate, many persons start a book or a writing project, but they are unable to complete it because sometimes writer's block comes in, life happens, and if you do not have the end in mind, it's hard to end up where you want to go. If you leave San Fernando and you head into Port of Spain, if you leave home in Duncan Village, San Fernando, you live in South Urpuch and you head into Port of Spain, you need to know, okay, I'm going to end up on Ricing Road. You don't just jump in your vehicle and drive in and say, well, let me see where I'll end up. Right? So having a plan was crucial. Also, in terms of the behind the scenes activity, I wouldn't advise someone to do this activity all by yourself. So, for example, some people, they design their own cover, they do all the writing, they read over for themselves, right? And some people even take out their own picture, and
Right.
and then publish a book. I wouldn't advise you to do that. I think that having the right team of persons around you makes it easier for yourself, and then it also makes the product better and of a higher standard. right? In terms of behind the scenes, well, navigating Amazon and so forth, because this book was self-published. So navigating Amazon and KDP platform and its requirements and so on can be a challenge, especially if someone is not tech savvy. I am tech savvy, but it was still a challenge, but it wasn't as challenging as it would be for someone who was not tech savvy. And in terms of the bookstore, well, in any new endeavor that you are starting, it would require additions to your network, walking the beat and meeting persons and so on. So that would be necessary in terms of getting your books into the bookstore. So personal associations and connections will be helpful in terms of getting your book out there into the hands of the readers. And then there's marketing. So as attorneys, we cannot advertise. So hence the reason my marketing for the book has been subdued. But for persons who are in other industries where they do not have that prescription, or they do not have that hindrance or that rule governing their activities, they would be free to engage in various creative and trending marketing strategies, inclusive of social media, interviews, giveaways, book fairs, so many different avenues there are to promote a book. And the final thing I would say is, do not try. Rome wasn't built in a day. So unless you are someone who is an international superstar, for example, or someone who is known worldwide, you do not expect that your book is going to become a bestseller overnight, right? So the purpose of writing a book is to communicate a message to an audience, right? That is the purpose of writing a book. Anything outside of that, so for example, financial remuneration or becoming famous or anything like that, those things are secondary, and those things are things that you cannot control, right? So what you can control is that you have a strong message, you have strong content, right? And then you make use of the appropriate distribution channels, right? Those are the things that you can control. When the book goes to the market and the market sees value in it, then over time, the sales will increase. And of course, there would come a certain degree of recognition with it.
Okay, I understand you fully. Now, before we wrap up, uh, I would have paid particular attention to something you would have said. I believe it was found in in the first part of the book. I saw you would have made a quote by former President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, and I want you to tell me. I'm going to give you the quote rather, and I want you to tell me why you chose that and what it really means to you before we bring an end to today's episode. And the quote says, "A deposit is how a lawyer knows that he has a client, and how a client knows that he has a lawyer." Talk to me about that.
One of the things that young attorneys who are listening would realize is that obtaining payments from clients can be a challenge. All right. Persons would come to you, they would sit in your office, they would ask you for help, you'd render a service, and then sometimes you may not be able to find that person, you may not be able to hear from that person, and so forth. So what the deposit does is that it helps the client to take what they are doing more seriously. So someone pays you a deposit, you find they'd have skin in the game, as the Americans say, and it's psychological, but they would take more interest. They would be more responsive and so forth, knowing that they would have already paid. So that is really what I took away from the quote, and I use that quote to reinforce the message that take a deposit on all cases as far as practicable, and it would also assist you in your cash flow position. All right, so that is it. And of course, what is the benefit of a quote if no one knows the person you are citing? And we all know who Abraham Lincoln was. So that would also strengthen the efficacy of the quote.
Good, good. I know what I even liked about the quote, apart from what you said, is that comfort of that client and lawyer relationship, that one knows that the other is there in case of turmoil, or anything at all where advice or representation may be needed. I also got that from that quote, in addition to what you said.
That's true. That is true. That is true. Because I would say that the relationship between an attorney and his client is sui generis, if I could use the legal term, meaning that it is something of a unique nature. And persons do look to their attorneys for advice. They look to their attorneys for their skill and knowledge. And also they look to their attorneys for reassurance when they are facing difficult times and for a certain degree of comfort. So I do agree with what you also got from the quote.
Great, great, great. All right, good. So, again, congratulations on the book. I wish you and the success of the book. I hope that you'll reach for the stars. And I hope that it continues to be read by not only lawyers who are in the field, but persons who are aspiring to be a lawyer and just trying to connect the dots of what really this business is all about. How do I how do I make a living from this? Right? And again, I wish you all the best with the future success of the book. Right? It's already looking good from where I am sitting. Right? So again, congratulations on that.
Thank you very much, Leonardo.
Now, as we begin to pull down the curtain on the final episode, I just want to circle back around now to the Legal Corner podcast series. Any closing remarks? Anything that you want to share about the podcast for our listeners today?
Leonardo, I would just want to say that this has been the fulfillment of a dream for us. I know we have another project that we are going to be working on where we will tell our story. So I don't want to preempt anything, but I just want to say that this really has been a fulfillment of a childhood dream for us. We went to the same secondary school. We struck up a friendship, particularly in physics lessons and so forth. And this really is the fulfillment of a childhood dream. And also, I would say it's inspiration to other Caribbean young people, other young persons in the developing countries and so on who may want to try their hand at having a podcast or doing some type of creative endeavor to put out there in the market. Take a chance on yourself, and you never could tell where what you are doing would end up.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with you. And you would have mentioned persons who may be interested in doing a podcast. And, you and I would have discussed when we would have put out an episode or when we look back on an old episode based on its overwhelming success. Because, sometimes we would have had one or two episodes that really have turned out to surprise us in terms of
Yes,
how well it was received.
yes,
And what I did notice is that um, our podcast has been able to reach a wide cross section of not only Trinidad and Tobago, but it has penetrated throughout islands within the Caribbean. And even if Europe and North America, we have seen some of those stats on some of those
yes.
episodes
And don't
that
forget
reflected
Africa,
such.
and don't forget Africa and
Abs-
Asia as well, even Oceania.
absolutely,
Yes,
absolutely, absolutely. And it was really, really inspirational to see um, some of those stats from places that probably you and I would never visit within our lifetime. you know, so
yes,
um,
for sure.
yeah. So basically, that's it. There. As we come to an end of the episode, I would personally like to thank all of our listeners who would have been with us from season one, episode one. And I must make mention of members of our social media marketing team. I know some of them quite personally. Most of them are friends of mine. Some of them are friends of both Colin and I, and they really helped us to extend the reach of our podcast into different groups and pairs, because all of them are different age groups and stuff like that, and they all in different industries in their various calls of life. And it has been a good run, and I too wouldn't preempt what's coming next, but to say that I do have high hopes. I know that it will be successful, just as this podcast has been. And really and truly, the best way I could sum this up is by saying thank you. Colin, anything else?
Thank you also to our guests who would have graced us with their presence. Some of them I knew personally, some of them are close friends and associates of mine, but there are also persons from the international arena who would have reached out to us and expressed an interest on appearing on our podcast. And also there are persons who are my senior in the field who graciously came. So I must once again say thank you to all of our guests.
Great. And as you said that, I remembered as well our first episode. It's so funny that you said that. This was during the throes of a pandemic, and our first guest was one of your seniors, someone that you work side by side with, and had a little professional relationship at the time, and that was talking about pandemic, and still to this day, even though the heights of the pandemic has left us, people still listen to that episode to this day, and it amazes me, right? So I too would like to thank our guest, and we wish all of our listeners all the very best in their future endeavors, whether you are an aspiring lawyer or you are one in practice. We wish you all the very best. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Corner podcast series. For more information, please visit us at our Facebook or Instagram pages, or send your comments to thelegalcornerpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.